Happy day, children. This is December month portion, class 7 science biology. We are going to study chapter 12, reproduction in plants. So if you see, all living organisms have a characteristics that they can produce their own kind. So this production of the offspring from the parents, that we call it as reproduction. So we're going to study the different modes of reproduction in plants. What are the topics we are going to cover in this chapter is reproduction, modes of reproduction, asexual reproduction, vegetative propagation, budding, fragmentation, spore formation, and in sexual reproduction, pollination, fruit and seed formation, and seed dispersal. So first is, what is reproduction? As we discussed, that all living organisms include plants and animals have the capability to produce new individuals in their lifespan. So thus reproduction makes the life continuous, which is not only essential for the survival of an organism, but it is also very necessary for the perpetuation and preservation of the species, because then only we can able to increase the number of member of a species, and we can avoid the extinct and the endangered species. So the process of reproduction is one of the important life process, and it is the very essential for the continuity of the species. So the modes of reproduction in plants. So plants have two kinds of parts, vegetative part and the reproductive part. Vegetative part, so these are the parts of the plant that plays a vital role, such as preparation of food, transportation of food, water and nutrients. So examples of vegetative part are roots, stems, leaves, buds. Reproductive part, these are the parts that plays a major role in the reproduction. Example, flowers and fruits. So reproduction can be categorized into two types, as like asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. So asexual reproduction mean like the new plants are produced without the use of the seeds. So what happens, that is the vegetative part, that we call it as vegetative propagation. So the leaves, stems, roots, buds participate in reproduction. So the process in which only one parent is involved in the production of new individuals of the same kind, that we call it as asexual reproduction. And sexual reproduction, the new plants are produced with the help of the seeds of the plant. So asexual reproduction in plants through the following methods, like vegetative propagation, budding, fragment, spore formation and fragmentation. The first process is vegetative buds. So you can see this is the structure of the roots and shoot system in a plant. So some buds are present in the leaves that are capable of developing into shoots. So these are called, we call the vegetative buds. So as the name suggests, vegetative propagation, like the type of reproduction takes place with the help of vegetative parts of the plant. That is, only one parent can produce the identical offspring in vegetative propagation. So natural means of vegetative propagation, plants that have the tuberous roots are as a storage organ, plants participate in the vegetative propagation. So these tuberous roots are sown in the soil, and there are buds present on the fruits that grow above the ground, and a new plant is formed. Example, sweet potato, dahlia. And next is vegetative propagation by stem. So you can see that examples, potato, stem, tubers. So like tuber roots, some plants have tuber stems. So that we call it as the buds or the eye of the potato. So this stems tuber stores the nutrients and bear the nodes. And next is vegetative propagation by leaves. So some plants have leaves that contain buds that can develop into new plant, that is bryophyllum. And artificial means of vegetative propagation, like cutting, grafting, etc. So cutting is a method in which cutting a plant from taken and planted. So this cutting is a part of the stem or the branch of the plant. Example, usually we'll use this in roses. So basic stem cutting, cutting planted with a node point in the soil. basic root cutting, and then we'll get a new plant with a new shoot from the root. And next is grafting. So sometimes two plants are joined together so that both of them can provide the desired characteristics of the new plant. Example we can say in the apples. So if you see the advantages of vegetative propagation, the plants that are produced with vegetative propagation grow faster than those that are produced from with sexual reproduction. So the plants that reproduce with vegetative propagation have fruits, flowers ahead of time. The plants that are produced have exactly the same characteristics as that of their parents. So the new plants are the exact copies of parent plant because they are produced from a single plant. So the next type we are going to see is budding. So as we all know that yeast is a unicellular organism that it is an anaerobes. So that contains a single cell. It is a fungi, not a plant. So it can propagate it very few hours if the proper amount of nutrients are available. So what happens as the yeast finds favorable conditions, that is proper food, moisture, everything, a small bulb like projection produces from the yeast called bud. So this one is the developing bud. So this is the parent yeast, or we can say parent yeast cell. Next the bud is coming, and then this bud new yeast cell will be coming, and then the chain of yeast cells, and then the yeast cells will be separated. So this bud grows gradually and can detach it from the parent yeast. So sometimes a chain of buds is formed which leads to a production of large number of yeasts together. So yeast is used in beer, wine industry, used in baking industry, etc. Next is the fragmentation. So algae like Spirogyra generally reproduce by the process of fragmentation. So in which they divide themselves into multiple parts. So you can see this is the parent Spirogyra. It can divide into multiple parts. It is fragmentation. Just it will divide it into two. So Spirogyra they develop into new parts. So Fibrogyra it actually belongs to the algae family. So as soon as the algae finds favorable conditions, that is water and nutrients, it fragments and grows into new individuals, new Spirogyra. So this process continues and the algae multiply quickly in a shorter period of time. Next is spore formation. So from the spores itself we can able to see it's very small. So this small plants contain spores that can able to float in the air and cause asexual reproduction. So if you see that a spore, it has a hard protective cover which protects it from the unfavorable environmental conditions like temperature, heat, light, humidity, moisture, etc. So what happens? The spore can travel very long distance and survive for a very long period of time. So as soon as they find the favorable conditions, moisture and nutrients, they germinate and form new plants. Example is moss and ferns. So this we can able to see the spore formation. In fungus, we can see reproduction in bread mold by spore formation. This is spore formation in leaf. So next we are going to study is the sexual reproduction in plants. So sexual reproduction we have studied like sexual organs like flowers and fruits. So the flower of the plant is the reproductive organ that participates in the reproduction, sexual reproduction. We all have studied in our 6th standard like the male reproductive part of a plant. We call it as stamen. Stamen has two parts, anther and the filament. The female reproductive part of a plant are called pistil or carpel. We have three parts in that: stigma, style, ovary, and inside the ovary we will have a bead-like structure called ovules. So some flowers contain both male and reproductive part of the plant, that is stamen and pistil. So that part we call it as bisexual flowers. So example lily, rose, hibiscus, mustard, etc. So some flowers they contain both the male reproductive part or female reproductive part, either stamen or pistil. So that we call it as unisexual flowers. Example papaya, watermelon, etc. So the stamen consists of anther that has pollen grains. So these pollen grains are the male gametes. So as we studied, this pistil contains three parts: stigma, style, ovary. So the sticky surface where pollen grains detached, that is called stigma. It is a style tube-like structure which connects the stigma and the ovary contains eggs in which the gametes or eggs are formed. That is nothing but the ovules, bead-like structure which is present inside the ovary. So function of a flower. The main function of a flower is to make the male and female gametes. Male gametes nothing but the pollen grain. Female gametes are ovules which is present. Okay, by the process of cell pollination. So pollination nothing but the transfer of pollen grains from the anther of a stamen to the stigma of a pistil is called pollination. So pollination actually takes place in two different ways: self pollination or autogamy, they say. That is, when the pollen grains land on the stigma of the same flower. So when the pollen grain from the anther of one flower reaches to the stigma of the same flower, that we call it as self-pollination or autogamy. Auto means same. So self-pollination usually we can able to see in bisexual flower. So cross-pollination or xenogamy. So when the pollen grains land on the stigma of a different flower, so whether it's of same species, same kind of flower or different kind of flower. So when the pollen grains from the anther of a flower or a plant transfer to the stigma of the flower of the same plant or that of a different plant of the same kind, that process we call it as cross pollination. So this transfer to another plant is mediated by insects, wind, water, animals, birds, etc. So this is the uh, pollination process. So self pollination from same plant but different flower, self pollination with the same flower. So agents of pollination, the process of pollination is carried out by external agencies like we have studied, like wind, water, insects, birds, animals, sometimes humans also. These are called the agents of pollination. So self pollination and cross pollination. Self pollination from same plant but different flower, self pollination within the same flower, and cross pollination from different flower, that is stigma of one flower to the pollen grains from the another flower. So next is fertilization process. So a zygote is formed as the fusion between male and the female gamete occurs. So this process of formation of a zygote, that we call it as, that is a new cell, that we call it as fertilization. Then the zygote develops and turns in an embryo. So when the pollens are deposited on the stigma of the pistil, it begins to germinate, and after some time what happens, a long pollen tube is developed from the pollen grain which passes through the style towards the female gametes in the ovary. So the male gametes move down the pollen tube and the tube enters the ovule inside the ovary. So the tip of the pollen tube bursts and the male gametes comes out of the pollen tube. So inside the ovary, the male gametes fuse with the female gametes present in the ovule to form a fertilized egg cell, that we call it as new cell called zygote. Then the zygote develops into an embryo, which is a part of a seed that develops into a new plant. So this is the process of zygote formation. That is, after this fertilization process, the ovary of the flower grows and then develops into a fruit. So the pollen grains germinating the male gamete moves down the pollen tube, stigma of the pollen tube, and then the pollen tube enters into the ovary, and then the zygote, the male gamete combined with the female gametes and then form the zygote fertilized egg. And after the fertilization process, the ovary of the flower grows and develops into a fruit. The remaining part of the flower will fall off. So the ovules develop and forms the seeds of the fruits. And the embryo, that is the zygote, is enclosed inside the seeds. So some fruits are fleshy and juicy, such as mango, apple, etc. And some fruits are hard like almond and walnut. So ovary containing the ovule, then it changes into fruit containing the seed. The seed, nothing but the embryo. And again, the seed will germinate, start germinating, and the seedling, and then into a new plant. So the cycle continues. Next is the fruits and the seed formation. So we have studied like fruits and the seed formation. And next is seed dispersal. So the transportation of seeds from the parent plant to different places is called seed dispersal. So agents of seed dispersal also we have studied like wind, water, birds, animals, etc. So these seed dispersal allows the growth of the same kind of plants in different regions. So this is helpful because it minimizes the competition for food, sunlight, water and minerals among the plants of the same kind in the same area. And is also helpful and allows them to grow in different habitat. So the process by which the seeds are scattered to different place far and wide from their parents is called dispersal. So seed dispersing agents. So seed dispersing agents by wind or air. If you see the seeds are very light or air-like structure can be easily carried away by the blowing wind. Examples are seeds of maple and drumstick which have wings, and seeds of madar or oak have hairs on them. So these seeds can be easily carried away by the wind and dispersed away from their natural habitat. And next is dispersal by water, coconut seed. So the coconut, the seeds with spongy and fibrous coating so as to float in water. Ability of the float in water. So and the coconut are dispersed through the water. So the coconut fruits have a fibrous outer coating which enables to float and carried away by flowing water to far off places. And next is dispersal by animals, xanthium. So the spiny seeds like xanthium and urina get attached to the bodies of animals. So along with the fruits, the seeds are also get dispersed. Then is dispersal by birds. The birds eat fruits along with the seeds, and the seeds will have outer covering. So these seeds are actually excreted through the bird feces, and then the digestive enzymes present in the digestive system of birds helps in dissolving the seed hard coat, and then they are excreted. Example, one such example is neem seeds are dispersed by the bird feces. And next is dispersal by explosion or bursting of fruits. We can see in castor and balsam plant. So due to the explosion of fruit, the seeds are thrown away from the plant with a great force in all directions. So example, castor plant bursts suddenly with a jerk and scatter the seeds. Similarly also we can see in the fruit of balsam. So next is germination of seed. So once seed forms, germination of seed and then into a new plant. So that key seed contains a plant embryo in a resting state which begins to grow under favorable conditions. So this process by which seed begins to grow is called seed germination. So this cycle continues to produce more and more offsprings for the preservation of species. Thank you, children.